Hi, welcome back. I hope things are going well. We are ready to begin our next chapter, and it begins with Isabel. Remember that Isabel is in Havana, Cuba in 1994. Isabel opened her eyes and lowered the trumpet from her lips. She was sure she had just heard the sound of breaking glass, but cars and bicycles kept streaming by under the bright sun on the Malecon, like nothing had happened. Isabel shook her head, convinced she was hearing things, and put her lips back to her trumpet. Then suddenly a woman screamed, a pistol fired. Pat! And the world went crazy. People rushed out of the side streets, hundreds of them. There were men, mostly, many of them shirtless in the 100-degree August heat, their white and brown and black backs glistening in the sun. They yelled and chanted. They threw rocks and bottles. They spilled in the streets, and the few policemen in the Malecon were quickly overwhelmed. Isabel saw the glass window in the general store shatter, and men and women climbed inside to steal shoes and toilet paper and bath soap. An alarm rang. Smoke rose from behind an apartment building. Havana was rioting, and her father and grandfather were somewhere right in the middle of it. Some people fled from the chaos, but more people raced toward it, and Isabel ran with them. Car horns beeped, bicycles swung around and pedaled back. People were as thick on the ground as sugar cane. Isabel weaved in and out among them, her trumpet tucked under one arm, looking for Papi and Lito. Freedom! Freedom! Chanted from the rioters. Castro out! Enough is enough! Isabel couldn't believe what she was hearing. People caught criticizing Fidel Castro were thrown into jail and never heard from again. But now the streets were full of people yelling, "Down with Fidel! Down with Fidel!" Papi! Isabel cried. Lito! Her grandfather's name was Marino, but Isabella called him Lito, short for abuelito, grandpa. Rifles boomed, and Isabel ducked. More police were arriving by motorcycle and military trucks, and the protest was turning bloody. The rioters and police traded rocks and bullets, and a man with a bloody head staggered past Isabel. She reeled in horror. A hand grabbed her, making her jump, and she spun around. Lito! She threw herself into her grandfather's arms. Thank God you're safe, he told her. Where's Papi? She asked him. I don't know. We weren't together when it started, her grandfather said. Isabel thrust her trumpet into his arms. I have to find him. Chabela, her grandfather cried. He used her childhood nickname, like he always did. No, wait! Isabel ignored him. She had to find her father. If he was caught again by the police, he'd be sent back to prison, and this time they might not let him out. Isabel dodged through the crowds, trying to stay away from where the police had formed a line. Papi! She called. Papi! But she was too short, and there were too many people. High above her, Isabel saw people climbing out onto the big electric sign hanging from the side of a tourist hotel, and it gave her an idea. She worked her way to one of the cars stuck in the riot, an old American Chevy with chrome tail fins still around from before the Revolution in the 1950s. She climbed up on the bumper and onto the hood. The man behind the steering wheel honked his horn and took the cigar out of his mouth to yell at her. Chabela, her grandfather shouted when he saw her. Chabela, get down from there! Isabel ignored them both and turned this way and that, calling out for her father. There! She saw her Papi just as he reared back and threw a bottle that smashed into the line of the police along the sea wall. It was the last straw for the police. At a command from their leader, they pushed forward into the crowd, arresting rioters and hitting them with wooden batons. In all the turmoil, a policeman caught up with her father and grabbed him by the arm. No! Isabel cried. She leaped down off the hood of the car and pushed her way through the pandemonium. When she got to her Papi, he was balled up on the ground, and the policemen were beating him with the nightstick. The policeman raised his truncheon to hit her father again, and Isabel jumped in between them. No, don't, please, she cried. The policeman's eyes flashed from anger to surprise and then back to anger. He reared back again to hit Isabel, and she flinched, but the blow never came. Another policeman caught his arm. Isabel blinked. She recognized the new policeman. He was Luis Castillo, Ivan's older brother. What do you think you're doing? The older policeman barked. Luis didn't have time to answer. A whistle blew. The police were being summoned elsewhere. The angry cop yanked his arm free from Luis and pointed his nightstick at Papi. I saw what you did, he said. I'll find you again. When all of this is over, I'll find you and arrest you, and they'll send you away for good. Luis pulled the angry policeman away, pausing just long enough to give Isabel a worried look over his shoulder. Luis didn't have to say anything. As her grandfather arrived and helped Isabel get her father to his feet, she understood. Papi had to leave Cuba tonight. Mahmoud, Aleppo, Syria in 2015. The afternoon, a dawn from a nearby mosque echoed through the bombed-out streets of Aleppo, the melodious, ethereal voices of the muaddin praising Allah and calling everyone to prayer. Mahmoud had been doing his math homework at the kitchen table, but he automatically put his pencil down and went to the sink to wash up. The water wasn't working again, so he had to pour water over his hands using the plastic jugs his mother had hauled from the neighborhood well. Across the room, Walid sat like a zombie in front of the television, watching a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon dubbed in Syrian Arabic. Mahmoud's mother came out of the bedroom where she'd been folding clothes and turned off the TV. Time to pray, Walid. Get washed up. Mahmoud's mother, Fatima Bashara, held her pink iPhone in one hand, and in her free arm she carried Mahmoud's baby sister, Hannah. Fatima had long dark hair she wore up on her head and intense brown eyes. Today she was wearing her usual around-the-house attire, jeans and a pink nurse's shirt she used to wear to work. She'd quit the hospital when Hannah was born, but not before the war had begun. Not before coming home every day with horror stories about the people she'd helped put back together. Not soldiers, but regular people. Men with gunshot wounds, women with burns, children with missing limbs. She hadn't gone nearly catatonic like Walid, but at some point it had gotten bad enough that she just stopped talking about it altogether. When he was finished and washing up, Mahmoud went to the corner of the living room that faced Mecca. He rolled out 2 mats, one of them and the other one for him and one for Walid. Their mother would pray by herself in her bedroom. Mahmoud began without Walid. He raised his hands to his ears and said, Allah Akbar, God is the greatest. Then he folded his hands over his stomach and said a brief prayer before reciting the first chapter of the Quran, the most holy book in Islam. He bowed and praised Allah again 3 times, stood and praised Allah again. They got down on his knees and hands and knees and put his head to the floor, praising Allah 3 more times. When he was finished, Mahmoud sat back up on his knees and ended his prayers by turning his head right and then left, recognizing the angels who recorded his good and his bad deeds. The whole prayer took Mahmoud about 7 minutes. While he'd been praying, Walid joined him. Mahmoud waited for his brother to finish, then rolled up their mats and went back to his homework. Walid went back to watching cartoons, and Mahmoud was just starting a new equation when he heard a sound over the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles theme song. A roar, like a hot wind rising outside. In a second, it took the sound to grow from a breeze to a tornado. Mahmoud dropped his pencil, put his hands to his ears, and threw himself under the kitchen table. By now, he knew what an incoming missile sounded like. Boom! The wall of his apartment exploded, blasting broken bits of concrete and glass through the room. The floor lurched up under Mahmoud and threw him and the table and chairs back against the wall of the kitchen. The world was a whirlwind of bricks and broken dishes and table legs and heat, and Mahmoud slammed into a cabinet. His breath left him all at once, and he fell to the floor with a heavy thud in a heap of metal and mortar. Mahmoud's ears rang with a high-pitched whine, like the TV when the satellite was searching for a signal. Above him, what was left of the ceiling light threw sparks. Nothing else mattered in that moment but air. Mahmoud couldn't draw a breath. It was like somebody was sitting on his chest. He thrashed in the rubble, panicking. He couldn't breathe. He flailed wildly at the debris, digging and scratching at the wreckage like he could somehow claw his way back to the place where there was air. And then his lungs were working again, raking in air great big gulps of air. The air was full of dust, and it scratched and tore at his throat as it went down, but Mahmoud had never tasted anything so sweet. His ears still rang, but through the buzz he could hear more thuds and booms. It wasn't just his building that had been hit, he realized. It was his whole neighborhood. Mahmoud's head was hot and wet. He put a hand to it and came away with blood. His shoulder ached and his chest still seared with every hard, desperate breath. But the only thing that mattered now was getting to his mother, his sister, and his brother. Mahmoud pulled himself up out of the rubble and saw the building across the street in a raw daylight, like he was standing in mid-air beside it. He blinked, still dazed, and then he understood. The entire outside wall of Mahmoud's apartment was gone. All right, that's it for today. I hope you guys have a great afternoon, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.